believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? I'm back. Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Francis, also known as Ricky Francis, and a great episode for you today. Today we got Matt Raymer from ContentSafe.co. He is a friend of mine and also the reason why you can find the video version of this episode and all my episodes on so many different platforms. You can find it on Band.video, Minds, Rumble, Odyssey, Float, Rockfin, and many others. But Rockfin particularly is a good place to listen or watch my episodes, because if you do watch the Ripple Effect Podcast or my other show, The Union of the Unwanted, you help support the show. It's kind of like Spotify for alternative media in regards to just you listening on the platform, get some financial support to the content creators. So definitely check out Rockfin, and all this stuff will be in the show description, or you can go to therippleeffectpodcast.com, which is a website that Matt is also responsible for. He is the one who helped create my website, his company, and he did a great job. And you can find links to all the channels, all the places you can find my show, all my shows, all the social media platforms I'm on, and much more on therippleeffectpodcast.com. And you can also find ways of supporting the show. I already mentioned Rockfin. And of course, let me also mention this is a value for value show. So if you get some value out of this conversation or any of my conversations, please consider giving some value back. And Rockfin is one of the ways you can do it. I have a Patreon page if you want to support me monthly. And if you do, you'll be able to participate in my once a month Patreon podcast. And what that is a podcast I do with my Patreon supporters. So it's a cool way of getting on the podcast. I also have a PayPal account if you want to do a one-time donation. I have a merch store, and I just uploaded some new merch. So now you have some new logos available in the merch store. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com, or you can go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com, click on support, and find all these ways of supporting the show. I also have a crypto wallet if you want to donate crypto. And last but not least, I've recently partnered with Richard Grove and the University of Reason. And if you sign up for the University of Reason or any of his courses, then it helps support the podcast. So please check out the links in the show description or on the website for the University of Reason. My guest today, Matt Raymer, has actually taken a few courses. And at the end of this episode, he gives a description and an explanation about his experience, what he gained from it, and all the benefits of the University of Reason and some of their courses and classes that they have to offer. So please check that out. It's another way of supporting the show. I think you can support yourself and support the show at the same time if you check out the University of Reason. Another thing I keep forgetting is Theory 6 Music. That's my solo music project. The music you hear during the podcast, and the intro, outro, in the middle, that's all Theory 6. The word theory, the number 6, you can find on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, all the places you can get music, you can find Theory 6. And if you purchase or stream the music, the theme song of this podcast, or any of the Theory 6 music, you can support the show that way. So consider supporting the show financially if you're in a good financial spot and you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. Just share the show, review the show, tell people about the show, and that all helps fight against the algorithms that are surely and most likely suppressing and shadow banning this show. Thanks again, guys. Enjoy this conversation. It's kind of a conversation about everything and anything, which is a nice break from the COVID-heavy podcasts I've been doing for about 2 years now. Enjoy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. What type of stuff you've been into? Well, what's been taking up much of your time?
Oh my goodness. A lot of content safe stuff. We should be rolling out uploaders for Substack and locals pretty soon. I was hoping to already have Substack up, but looks like locals is going to go up maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And that's taken up a lot of time. Plus, I've been doing a lot of monitoring work. This is stuff that happens behind the scenes to make sure that we know what's going on when a video fails to upload, when it fails to download, when it doesn't get converted to the right format. Because all of this is supposed to be mostly automatic. And if you're going to have it mostly automatic, it means you got to have all sorts of monitoring. And it has been one of our weaknesses over the last 2 years is having good monitoring. And I think I finally got to a spot that I'm pretty happy with the method we're using, and I just need to keep refining it until it just wakes me up in the middle of the night saying, "Hey, you got a problem? Come over here and fix it. I can't fix it myself." That's taken up a lot of my time. I've been doing a lot of actual like project acquisition work. We had a pretty good year last year, at least Anomalous Design did, and we decided to invest in building our own business development team, and that takes a lot of time. I have a client right now that I've spent let's see, we're on March now. Oh my goodness, we spent 6 months with this guy planning his project. It was supposed to have been done in 2 months, but he changed his mind 3 times about what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. So that's taken up a lot of my time. And we've got, of course, our mechanic mobile site it's still there, but we ran into some obstacles last year and we weren't able to launch it. But hopefully by next week, it will be officially launched.
And what's that?
That is a freelance auto mechanic matching service. So we match automobile owners to mechanics, and it takes care of the escrow. And we've got a lot of ambitious ideas about how we want that service to work. A lot of it's based on my own experience trying to deal with freelance software development services. They really, really, really stink. They're terrible. My biggest beef with the freelance industry is that they really don't help freelancers get clients. All they really provide that has any value is the escrow service, where they take the payment, they hold it. But the weaknesses come in that they tend to lean toward the person who's making the payment. So if there's ever an issue, there's really nobody on the other side in the company that understands what it is you're doing so that they could arbitrate effectively and equitably arbitrate. More often than not, they're going to say, just try to smooth it over and just do whatever the guy says. Well, we both know if you do construction, sometimes you can smooth it over, but you can't smooth it over all the time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's funny because construction is one of those things where contractors get a bad name because usually residential contractors, they're much different than commercial contractors, because as a commercial contractor, we have certain things that we're required to do, so if something's in the specs, we know there's going to be an inspector there, there's going to be people monitoring our work, so we're used to doing things the way that they should be done correctly,
right?
Right. But residential work, you're dealing with a lot of people who just don't know that much about what they're getting a quote for, so it's really easy to kind of like bullshit them or say, oh, I'm going to do this or that for you, and then they cut corners somewhere and you're not aware of where those spots are, or the little tricks that contractors will do. And if you're, for example, like Mass DOT inspectors in Massachusetts, they know that when we're required to put 4 inches of concrete, gravel is cheaper than concrete. So contractors will put a little bit more gravel and give you maybe 3 inches of concrete, and so they'll
Yeah.
around with a 2x4 or a level and check and see how many inches before you pour. They'll put it up on the forms and check. But if you're doing a concrete driveway for a resident, they might not even go out there and check. So you could lie, oh, I'm charging you for 6 inches of concrete or 8 inches of concrete, and you could not even give them what they're paying for. So that's why residential contractors have such a bad name, because you can get away with that type of stuff. You can get away with dealing with customers that aren't even aware of like what type of concrete you're using, right? So if you do a Mass DOT job, we're required to do, they have like a Mass DOT mix that you get from the supplier, and it has to, there's certain types of aggregate that can and cannot be used, certain types of fillers, and how much of those fillers can and cannot be used. And then we have to give those slips to the state afterwards, showing that like, hey, we're using the Mass DOT mixed concrete. But you go to a residential job, you could tell them like, hey, you know what, we're going to use 4,000, they call it 4,000 psi is like standard for mix for concrete, but you could cheap out and do like 3,000 or whatever, a cheaper grade concrete. So it just, there's so many, and mechanics are the same way, like notoriously back in the day before, like you were kind of forced to have to go to a dealership. Now so much of it's computers, and so much of it's like each car maker has like IT guys that are experts in those cars, because cars so different. Back in the day, like you didn't have the computer didn't do much. Now there's multiple computers in every car. Each one has different software, different engineering, and so you always need to find a guy who's like specific to your car. And usually they complicate things. And I know in like the States there was some issues with how, and I know BMW, I think it was the German makers and some of the other ones, where they would give you a code, but they wouldn't tell you what the code, what it was. So you had to go to the dealership anyways, and basically like they would tell you. And I think there's even, because my brother had a Beamer, I think this happened to him, where the dealer doesn't even know what the code is either. Like they send it out to like headquarters in like Germany, and then they just tell them what to do, but they don't actually give them the specifics on what was broken. And it was like there's all this fuckery that was going on to make sure that they forced you to go to their dealership to get the repairs done, instead of you being able to go to a mom and pop place. So there's like all these layers of just kind of bullshit, and then to go back to like contractors, and it's weird, right? Because there's this, I heard Rogan and Dave Rubin have a conversation about this like when last time Rubin was on his podcast, which was a while ago, but I remember them talking about how, like so Dave Rubin's like a libertarian, he's kind of like very libertarian minded, and he believes the free market fixes everything, and the state kind of just complicates and makes things worse. And I know from firsthand experience, he's right in many cases. But I can also see the argument that having a certified contractor, like when you do Mass DOT work, you have to be like certified. You have to be Mass DOT certified. Having that, or even better, electrician, right? Like having a licensed electrician, that kind of makes sense, instead of having like a Joe Schmo come in. He says he knows how to do the work, and next thing you know, your house burns down because he didn't know what the hell he was doing, like, so in contracting, like I can kind of, and I'm sure it's like this in all industries, where like I can see both sides of the argument, where like in a way, like working for the state is a nightmare. Like there's so much paperwork required. There's so many like submittals and certifications of compliances and all this like ridiculous paperwork, that as a small business like us, it's just like we spend tons of time doing stuff that doesn't make us any money. That is just stuff to keep the state happy, that they're just asking of us. So we do stuff that has nothing to do with the actual physical construction itself. It's just paperwork after paperwork. And I know firsthand, a lot of this shit doesn't even get looked at, because there's been plenty I
Mhm.
caught myself afterwards. I'm like, oh fuck, I fucked up on that certified payroll, or I fucked up on whatever paperwork I was filling out.
It's an ocean of paperwork,
Yeah,
and they can't even find
I
anything
can't
in
keep up with
it.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
you're right. What was the
Yeah.
question again? I just went on a long rant.
Well, no, 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 it was great because you hit a lot of stuff that I think, is relevant to what I was talking about. We're looking to try to improve, uh, that relationship between the mechanic and the automobile owner. We wanna try to mentor the younger mechanics. We're trying to bring on older, more experienced mechanics, mentor them, right? But we also want to provide information to automobile owners, to say, do you even really need a mechanic? Is this something you could do yourself? And another aspect is providing a full like chain of evidence for both sides. So we're going to have uploads of video and still photos to try to demonstrate what the problem was, and then on the mechanic side to demonstrate what the resolution was, and then provide real arbitration with a person who actually understands what's going on, a real mechanic that they can actually arbitrate and they can see bullshit whenever they see bullshit.
What made you want to get it involved with it? Was this just like you saw a hole in the market and you're like, you know what, this is something that,
Well, my
or
business
are you?
partner came to me. Okay, this is actually an intersection of things. One, I have a business partner with that's a mechanic. But at the same time, I've also been building and helping people design social networks. I had an experience a few years ago where a guy that was in the European football industry came to me and asked him to help design. Ultimately, we parted ways. We couldn't agree on how to implement. But out of that work with him, I realized that the social networks of the future, they cannot be something like Facebook. Social networks in the future have to be niche communities because each community has its own unique vocabulary, it has its own unique methodologies. And I just can't see LinkedIn. Like, say, we look at Facebook versus LinkedIn and we say, oh, Facebook is the social network and LinkedIn is the business network. But if you look at LinkedIn, it's too vanilla to actually satisfy every industry and what the requirements of each industry. So in the football industry, they had contracts that had to be observed. They had different, protocols. And presently, at least whenever I was dealing with this guy, he said most of the European or most of the global football industry used LinkedIn to settle contracts and negotiate and all of those things. He said it was just common, net LinkedIn chats. He said, but it doesn't really work because there are certain types of contracts and forms and record keeping that you really ought to be doing that you just can't do with LinkedIn. Well, that experience came to me with this mechanic, and I was like, well, really what you're wanting, freelance sites are specialized social networks. That's really what they are. So
That's
we create, well,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, I'm like, that's kind of the way I always looked at LinkedIn. Like, I never signed up for it. I'm like, because I'm like, it just seems like another social media site. And if you already, like, if you already have a job or a career, then I didn't see the real big purpose of it. Besides, I guess you're connecting with other people in the industry, but isn't it better to do it in person and network?
It is better. In my opinion, uh, human connections are better. Even in my own business, even though I'm in the IT world, the best contracts I've ever gotten were people I met face to face. People just won't trust you unless they can actually shake your hand. Uh, but what we're trying to do is go beyond what, say, a LinkedIn or a Facebook would offer by providing human experience in the equation. And I really think that this is going to be a hot idea. And another level to this on a business on a business level is we're planning to franchise this so that the people who hire the mechanics are from the community that the mechanics come from. We would rather that franchise holder be the one who vets them, and we could help him with arbitration. We'll be providing all the software infrastructure and the escrow services, but we would like him to be able to manage his community and to actually know what's going on. He can understand his customers, he can understand his mechanics better than I could, or even my business partner who's in Ohio could understand someone in Massachusetts. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good idea. It's just taking us some time to get it written properly.
And good ideas are the origin of every, great idea, right? It just starts with an
Right.
idea, and then you start kind of molding it into a great idea. I was fascinated with speaking of cars, this guy Doug I always say his last name wrong because I forget it. Demara. He's like the biggest car channel reviewer on YouTube. And I find him fascinating because one, like he doesn't do anything special. He doesn't do like the drone videos where
Uh-huh.
cars are driving and looking all
Yeah.
cool, around a track. He literally just like reviews the car. He basically like analyzes all the little quirks and little cool details of the car that usually you don't pick up unless you like own one for quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
when you just see a car, you don't know that has this cool button, that has this cool feature or whatever. So he just has like a cool little personality that people enjoy, and he became like the biggest car reviewer. And it's funny because I heard him talk about how people get mad at him because when he's inside the car, he uses his iPhone to record it. And he's like, how the fuck does this guy, the biggest car channel in on YouTube and probably in the world, and this guy is using a freaking iPhone when there's channels after channels and channels, like Car and Driver has a channel, Motor Trend, tons of channels all over, and then obviously like other smaller ones, car reviews where they're doing like really like nice 4K videos of the car driving and all, and he's killing all of them. And he just had
Mm-hmm.
this idea of going at it differently. Like his idea was, instead of just doing what every car reviewer does and talk about the horsepower and quarter mile times and how it handles and how it feels driving, his videos only at the very end he talks about how it is to drive. The majority, like 99% of the video, is him just dissecting little quirks about the outside of the car, little cool things that you might not pick up on with styling,
Mm-hmm.
and giving you a little bit of a history on it. And then really some of the cool stuff is when he gets inside and he starts telling you about like just cool features and little things that make it unique or whatever. And so it's like, and that's his big thing. He always says, and I'll tell you about the quirks of the car, the quirks and features. And there's just no video out that no car reviewer out there that focus on that, like the little quirks of
Right.
the car. When you own a car, you'll pick up on little things that somebody else might not pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing a car review video, a lot of times these guys kind of just talk about the styling, then they talk about how it drives and how fast it is or whatever. They don't really take the time to dissect all those little things. So he just found he found his own little quirk, and it worked. And this guy,
And
yeah, go ahead.
and I can see why that would work, because I don't know if you are old enough to recall the time when people used to name their cars. I recall this as a kid, that people would have, like my sister would have a name for her car and it was based on the quirks of the car. Right. So I could see why focusing in on the quirkiness or the uniqueness of something would be a hit.
Yeah, but well, you know what it is? It's when he does a review on a car, what makes it interesting for me to watch is those little things. Those little things is
Mm-hmm.
because if he's doing a video on some high end car that I'll never be able to own or sit in, he's giving me all those little features and telling me about all those cool little quirks that I would never know about unless I actually own the car myself, and
Mhm.
much of the time you're seeing a car at a car show, a high end like Ferrari or Lamborghini or whatever it may be, or Audi R8, whatever, whatever cool car it is, and you see it, but you don't really know all the little details and all the little, just okay, how does the door open? Do they find some unique way of putting the button somewhere? All
Mhm.
these little things that you wouldn't really know, or like, the armrest,
Well,
is there
wasn't that also one of the things that people liked about Japanese cars versus American cars?
what the
That right? That there were little details or little thoughtful extras in a Japanese car that an American car manufacturer, at least in the past, wouldn't have paid any attention to.
Well, you see that with even with watches, right? If there's watch companies where you buy a watch and they'll use like people are big into like custom little parts. So it's like, okay, is the buttons on the side, do they have the watchmaker's logo on it? Or is it a standard
Mhm.
button that, so all these little things, like how much attention and detail went into every little thing. I'm a big car guy, and my brother and I have always been into cars, and we had a car club back in the day. This was like during the Fast and Furious era, and we had a car. We went. We still go to tons of car shows every year, and we enjoy modifying our cars and stuff like that. And one of the things we like is those like unique cars that have like unique little things about them that you could tell they took the time to just think about. It wasn't like like Maserati, for example, gets a lot of shit, because like the Ghibli, which is kind of like their entry level affordable Maserati, it's a beautiful car. It still sounds like a Maserati, looks like a Maserati, but to cut costs, it shares parts with like a Dodge Dart, for example. Like there's parts in it that come from like a really inexpensive car, and so people will like they'll complain about that because if you're buying a Maserati, they want everything to be unique about it. They want everything
Mhm.
Maserati, and obviously to cut costs, so it's like so. And then if you buy like a Aston Martin, a beautiful British car, what makes it really special is that every Aston Martin, those engines are hand built by a person, and when you pop the
Mhm.
hood, it tells you their name. And I believe
Oh, cool.
many of
Cool.
them
That's
even have
nice.
the number of the mechanic on there, the guy who built the engine, in case you needed to contact them to like
Wow.
so that's what makes. And I believe the new C8 Corvette is like that too. I believe that it's, or maybe not the standard one, but I believe the Z06, the new Z06 is all hand built by each one's hand built by a
You
person.
know, that those are built in my hometown.
The Corvettes.
Yeah, yeah. Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Oh yeah, of course, because
Yeah.
isn't the
The Corvette plant and the Corvette Museum are
that's what I
there.
was gonna say. Yes,
Yeah.
Kentucky. Yeah, yeah. That's two reasons why I've always wanted to go to Kentucky. I can't convince my wife quite yet, but I'm working on it. I'm like,
Well, you want another quirk
sure.
about that? Did you know that the International Corvette Museum had a sinkhole underneath it and it collapsed?
When was
Let me find the year, but I didn't know that until I saw it on a YouTube video a few months ago.
and you lived
Let's see.
you lived in Kentucky and you didn't know that? So
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, see, that was after I left and came to Southeast Asia, but
oh, so it was in
let's
our.
see.
It wasn't like super long ago. It was in our lifetime, right? As
It
adult.
was in our lifetime for sure, but it was between 1995 and now.
Wow, that's it.
Let me get that. Sinkhole. Does the Corvette still sink?
My so I've had two vets. I had my first vet was a '01 Z06, and then I had a '05 C6. And the nice thing about living at home with Portuguese parents and working construction and being single, you didn't have a whole lot of bills. So
So you can afford an expensive car.
well, it's just one of those things where I always loved cars, so I would save up, and all my money would go towards my. I mean, even for a long time, I wasn't even a big drinker. I mean, in my 20s, I was. I was really into just fitness and stuff like that, and really only when I became single in my 20s where I started partying up a little bit more. But by then I already was smart enough to save some money to buy the nice car. So it was smart of me. But uh yeah, it's Kentucky's one of those places where I've always wanted to go to.
Kentucky's a beautiful state. I lived there. I was born in Louisville, and I actually lived most of my childhood in southern Indiana, right across the Ohio. But my family has ancestry in Kentucky going back 13 generations. Yeah, a
Wow.
long time. If you go to the
Is that
phone
like the
book,
beginning of America? Because I mean, I
it is. My ancestors were Germans, and this is a weird story. I don't. They got a land grant. Two brothers, Abraham Raymer and some his brother, got a land grant in Kentucky from the colonial government or the revolutionary government, actually. And they settled in, I think it was Butler County, if I remember correctly. If you go to a phone book in Bowling Green and you look up Raymer, it takes up like 2 entire pages in an old school phone book. There's a lot of us. Uh, because I was, went to school in Southern Indiana, I didn't really realize that because I was the only person with my surname. Whenever I moved in high school back to Kentucky, I was like, first day, I sat down, I said, Matthew Raymer. And the guy next to me was like, hey, who's your grandfather? And I said, I gave him my grandfather. Says, oh, yeah, we're cousins. That's crazy, isn't it? I'm trying to get you the year that the sinkhole hit. Uh,
well, I'm a big bourbon guy, so that's I've been to Napa, and I'm glad I went like a long time
mm,
ago. We went for a wedding. My wife had a friend that was getting married there, and then we're like, you know what? Like first we're like destination weddings in Napa. I'm like that's gonna be expensive, but then we thought about it. We're like, when are we ever gonna go to Napa? We might as well take advantage of it and go and make a little vacation out of it. So we went there like a couple days early, and it's funny because somebody told me this before, and they're absolutely right. Like if you don't like wine, you hate Napa. If you like wine, you love Napa. There's like no, because
my
literally there's nothing else to do there. Like it
my
restaurant specializes in wine and food that goes well with that wine, and there's vineyards. That's it.
mhm. My nephew, I have two nephews. One is like really close to my age, and he right at the beginning of the lockdowns, he and his parents went to Napa, and that's what they did. They just went to Napa to have wine.
Well,
And
I'll never
so
be there
yeah,
again. I mean, I've my wife. I remember not too long ago. She's like, do you think we'll ever go to Napa again or California in general? I'm like, nope. I'm like, I will not be. I mean, even though the COVID stuff has seemed to take a back seat to. I mean, thank you, Putin, Dr. Putin, let us cured COVID, Dr. Putin. But
mhm.
it's yeah, it's fascinating how quickly things just go from people still being afraid to like
180.
it's nuts. Like literally
Yeah.
people who I
Mhm.
know were wearing masks like weeks ago who now are like COVID's not even a topic that's brought up anymore. Like nobody cares. It's like it's
Right.
almost we talk about it like it was
Unfortunately, where I'm at, it takes 3 to 6 months for things to catch up. So
it's
there's still, you're starting to see, like, it was really bad in January. Everybody and his brother had the masks all up, all up, properly fitted and all that. But since January, you start seeing gradually them creeping below their nose. And it's like, well, give it another couple months and nobody will be wearing them anymore.
that is kind of funny. Like, how serious COVID is by how people wear their masks. Like, when it's at its worst, like everybody's wearing it at their nose, then it gets below the nose, then it becomes just like a chin strap, and then eventually it's off. And we're like, oh, we're over COVID now. And you can tell by
Right.
the mask meter.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. 2014 was whenever the sinkhole opened up in
Oh,
the floor of the center of the museum, and it swallowed I think it was 6 Corvettes.
And
Oh,
those,
8 rare and one of a kind Corvettes.
damn.
Yeah, I was like shocked. I saw that, and it was like one of those YouTube videos about earthquakes or something like that. It's like, or no, sinkholes, famous sinkholes. And I was like, whoa! I used to work across the street from the museum. I went whenever I went to graduate school in computer science, because we had a pretty decent computer science program at Western Kentucky, which is in Bowling Green. And I would work night shift because my parents ran a motel across the street from the Corvette Museum. So I got a desk job, and I would run night shift while I mostly either studied or read. And so I knew that whole area there. In fact, the Corvette plant, it was right behind us at the motel. So I know that place.
So would you get people coming into town to go see the museum, stay at your?
Oh my goodness, they had this thing called the Corvette Homecoming every year, and there were probably about 50 hotels in Bowling Green, and 60 hotels were full that night. I mean, it was crazy.
Well,
Crazy.
the thing I always loved about Corvettes, and they were shit for a long time. I mean, obviously it was a super cool car, and then the 80, or not even the 80s, the 70s with the unleaded fuel and the death of the muscle car era. It all American cars kind of just went to shit for a while, and then that's where like the early Japanese or the early 90s, the Japanese cars, in the late 80s, the Japanese cars were killing the American cars. I mean, you could go buy a twin turbo Supra or a 3000 GT Mitsubishi, or they had the VR4 Mitsubishi, which was a cool car, all-wheel drive, twin turbo, 6-cylinder. The 300ZX Nissan, which was like a they had the 6-cylinder twin turbo. I mean, these cars were everything was like turbocharged. Or the Mitsubishi Eclipse was really cool in the 90s, the RX-7, and they were just with the rotary engine. Like, they were such cool cars, and they were putting out as much horsepower as the big V8s you were getting in the Mustangs and the Camaros. And I mean, my first car was a 93 Camaro Z28 with the LT1 5.7 engine. I had like 300 horsepower. You could get a Nissan 300ZX with the turbo 6-cylinder in there, 300 horsepower stock, just about. I think they're both just, I'm like, this is crazy. I have a big giant boat of a car, and with 5.7, they have a little 3.0 liter 6-cylinder. It's and they're getting the same horsepower, and they're getting better gas mileage, and the fit and finish on those cars were better. Everything about them were better. I mean, I loved my Camaro, but I mean, every time you close the door, you just heard rattling everywhere. The whole car rattled. And so it was just one of those things where just they just were a little. And some people blame the unions, right? Because they were saying how, like, they just kind of got lazy, right? It got too expensive, getting paid too well, right? And
yeah, my neighbor, oh my goodness, my neighbor in Bowling Green was a Corvette employee, and man, they lived. But I have to give that guy credit. He lived high. He made a ton of money at the Corvette plant, but he was smart. He didn't like have expensive cars outside. He took his land, he made a vegetable and flower garden out of it, set up roadside booths, and his wife would sell vegetables and fruit from the roadside. I mean, some of these guys were smart, some of them were stupid, but I think the unions did have some degree of blame in the poor output.
Yeah, well, you know what ends up happening, and we being in construction industry, we see it also. The unions can get in the way of basically you being able to pay somebody that is a good employee more, and pay somebody who's not a good employee less, and give them that incentive, because all the union wages are so high in the construction industry that literally, like, everybody gets paid just about what the union wages are, because every 6 months they go up anyways. So everybody's basically getting paid the same, and you can't really afford to pay, the guy who's a better employee much more than the guy who's not a good employee. And then there's all these regulations, like if we work in the Springfield area where our office is, and we're in Ludlow, Massachusetts, near Springfield, Massachusetts, then we're fine because our guys are from that local. They're members of that local, that union office. Even though when we go to the Berkshires, we're still using the same union laborers and operators, because our guys aren't from that local. They will harass us and tell us we have to hire one of their guys. So it's almost like you're in our territory. So we need to get a piece of the pie. So that you end up, so when we go to the Berkshires, we will get harassed by the union up there saying like, hey, you need to put one of our guys on this job. And we're like, well, we're a small business. We only have a handful of guys. What am I going to lay off a loyal, good employee to get your schmuck of a employee who isn't working yet in the middle of summer, probably because he sucks? And, or our other option is we hire one more employee than we need. And then this job that we have like no room for error because the profit margin's so little. Now that profit is going towards that, paying that employee, so you don't harass us. It's like, it's a freaking racket, and if you go back during the Industrial Revolution, yes, it made sense. You had corporations that were, big, the Rockefellers, all these people who were making tons of money, and they weren't sharing the wealth, and people working a lot of hours. They weren't getting raises, they weren't getting breaks. And then there was a necessity for unions. But just like every good idea eventually gets corrupt, and unions are no different. And you meet people and they're either like super for unions or they're super against unions. And I think like all topics, it's not black and white, and it's not that simple. Like there's going to be times where, you can show me an example where a union would make sense, and they they do give a some security and some help to a person who might otherwise be taken advantage of by their employer. But you can also see the example of being the employer where you're like, okay, now we're being harassed by the union. And I mean, here's one more before you get in your story, just another quick little story about how how some of these rules and regulations don't really benefit anybody, and it helps the unions, and it helps basically the crappy employee, crappy employee. We had a project where we actually needed a operator. We got there was a representative of the local operators union who came to our job site and said, hey, do you guys need an operator? And I'm like, actually, this time we actually do. We could use another operator, because typically the only operator we have is my father. And if we have two little jobs going at once, he's kind of being pulled in every direction. So he's like, okay, I'll send you a guy. And I'm like, well, can you make sure he's a decent dude? And so they send us a guy. He ends up, like, the first day on a job, he smashes our dump truck with the machine. He almost kills an employee. So I called the representative. I'm like, dude, this guy has to go. I'm like, he's already cost us money. He hasn't even made us any money. I'm like, he's cost us money. And I'm like, he has to go. And so per the rules of the operators union, we can't lay him off because so they had nobody else to replace him with. So our options were, we keep him, or if we let him go, we can only let him go because there's no more work for that specific machine. So we can't use that machine. So like we were stuck in a position where I'm like, okay, well, this guy's going to he's going to end up killing somebody. So we're like, you know what? We don't have any work for you tomorrow. So we had to park that machine and just basically pretend it wasn't being used, bring in a different machine, a smaller, less convenient machine, but just so the union didn't show up and give us a hard time and say, hey, you laid that guy off, that means that machine can't be used, because if you're laying him off, it's only because you don't have work for that machine. So it's like all these stupid like things that I'm like, who's this benefiting besides a shitty employee? I mean, just obviously he's not that good, because the truth is, if you're a good employee, and now more than ever, it's harder to find them. you're going to do whatever it takes to keep them. You know, you're going to,
That's right. That's right. I've often said this to, even in my business, people look at my business and they say, "Oh, it's easy to replace a developer." No, no, it's not. It's not easy. If you get someone who's talented enough, you get a lot of people who they're fresh graduates, they really don't know anything, and you have to train them. So you've got all of this capital invested in training this person in what your company does. You're going to fire them? No way. No, no, no. That's why I usually hire people who are within my family's network because they have some accountability. Their uncle, their dad, their whatever is going to be embarrassed if they don't behave right. So I can't just go out and hire anybody, right? I was going to say that my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was a coal miner. He died in a coal mining accident. And if there was any time that you could perhaps justify a union of some kind, it was in that early 20th century period where what other options do you have? You got this rich guy comes in and sets up a coal mining company. Where else will you go in South Central Kentucky? And for them, there were no unions. They literally lived in a place with a company store. So their food, the school, my mom, everything was owned by the coal company. So whenever my grandfather died, she was hazed by the mine owner's daughter because she was still in elementary school at the time, and she would pick on my mom because they sued the coal mining company over the death of my grandfather. So yeah, there are times, but providing other opportunities or a limited wage pool are probably better than a union now,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. Have you watched Dope Sick, the series?
No.
Oh, you got to. Well, one, it takes place a little bit in I forget which town, but a coal mining town.
Hmm.
But it's about the history. You'll like this, and I keep telling people to watch.
Virginia.
It takes place in Virginia?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's about it's a true story. It's based on the true story of the Sackler family, who's from Purdue Pharma, who started at the pill epidemic. And it goes and
Mm-hmm.
it goes really I tell people all the time, like, watch it because you'll see the parallels, and you'll also start understanding how a pharmaceutical company can manipulate the science, how they can manipulate the government, how they can manipulate and control the FDA, and how they can push poor science. Here's one thing that was I tell people, because just to kind of give them an example of the parallels. So in Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family, they were having feedback from the doctors that their Oxycontin was wearing off or not working. It was supposed to relieve you of pain for 12 hours. It's supposed to be like the best painkiller ever in the world, the world has ever seen. And it wasn't. People, the pain was coming back much sooner. It wasn't lasting that long. So instead of taking a situation that would expose their product for being flawed or maybe misrepresented, because they said it would kill pain for 12 hours and it didn't. They took this negative and made it a positive. What they did is they said that it wasn't, they basically put the focus on the pain coming back, not because the product wasn't working, but because the pain was just stronger than the product could handle. So they called it breakthrough pain. And
no, breakthrough cases. Okay.
Exactly. So so you look at similar situation, right? The vaccine didn't work, so the product didn't work, and instead of it being exposed for a situation where, like, hey, your product's not working, people are still getting sick and hospitalized or whatever, they turned it into a positive and said it's breakthrough cases. It's because of it's this magical term, and all you need to do is get a booster shot. And they did the same. Purdue Pharma did the same thing. They sold because what they did is they went to the doctors and they told them if they ever got some feedback of a breakthrough pain case, what they should do is all they have to do is double the dosage. So what they did is they actually sold more because of this issue. This issue led to them selling more because now they convinced and it's amazing how you can just make up medical terms like that. Breakthrough pain, like no doctor said like, what the fuck's breakthrough pain? Like, oh, aren't you just basically putting a new term on somebody who just has pain because your product's not working? You're putting this like magical medical word that doesn't.
And I don't know if do you follow Jessica Rose's Substack?
I do. Yes. Yep.
You saw the one that she published a few days ago about, I believe it was Jessica that published a commentary on an article about how these boosters are destroying the immune system.
I didn't see. I'm sure I probably got it and never got around to reading it.
I'm the same way. I get a tsunami of articles every day, and I can't read all of them.
I know. I'm like, I'll get back to this, and then I never get back to it.
Yeah, same. But you know, that's the problem. You've got people become addicts to OxyContin, and here you're going to get them completely unable to defend themselves against another virus other than COVID. At least that's the way I understood what I read. That it was restricting your immune system, training it that it only created antibodies for COVID.
I was just watching what my English Premier team is Tottenham Hotspurs, and I was just watching their last game, and again, this has happened over and over. First of all, it's happened to Tottenham, I think, twice or three times already, where they had a one of their games had to be stopped because somebody in the stands was having a heart attack or some type of fainting type of situation. And so when that happens, the referee will stop the match and let the medical team get to the person and kind of figure that out before they start up again. But I've been watching sports forever. Since I was a kid, I've been watching sports. I've never seen this happen. And never in my life seen this happen. And since Christian Eriksen, the Denmark player who passed out during his game, which was absolutely insane, since then you just see it happen with players and fans alike over and over again. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it's happened before, but because there wasn't this giant rollout of experimental vaccines, I never thought much of it. It just like, oh, okay, that's weird.
But it hasn't happened before.
No,
no, this is unique. And we're talking about, I cannot believe the irony of someone insisting on boosters in a newscast, and then they collapse because of the booster. So you got comedians, you got newscasters.
Yeah, McDonald. What's her name? Something. And how the timing, like sometimes you're like,
it's perfect. It's perfect timing, or depends on your perspective. It's not perfect timing if you're a pharmaceutical company.
And then did you see the interview she did with Dr. Drew? She did an interview with Dr. Drew. Did you see?
I'm not taking the next booster.
Yeah, and Dr. Drew actually was like basically saying yes, that was most likely because of the vaccine, which I was kind of stunned that he was willing to even go that far.
No, Drew has been surprising. He has actually been fairly bold in admitting things like that.
Well, he also was one of the first public doctors that was going around saying like, hey, this is a media-made epidemic. Like this isn't, they're the ones who are scaring people and whatever. But then he would always go back to, but listen to CDC and listen to Dr. Fauci.
Yeah. See, that's the problem, and I've noticed this also in the Ukraine-Russia thing. I understand that information is nuanced, that the situation is nuanced, but I think that we only prolong things whenever we just don't state our minds. That's what happened with COVID. Everybody hedged their bets, and I did it myself to some extent, even though I was skeptical from before the lockdowns. I was skeptical, But even I would hedge whenever someone asked me, rather than just stating what I felt. And even caveating that by saying, look, this is just my opinion, but this is what I think is happening. And don't hedge your bets, because whenever you hedge your bets, you don't provide people with the opportunity to question the situation. And the earlier you get them to question it, the harder it is for the propaganda to lock in.
Yeah, I was gonna get, or I wanted to get your opinion on the Russia thing and kind of what the local media, how are they spinning it? What are they saying? And maybe just your
Mhm.
perspective on the whole thing.
Well, let me just practice what I just preached. Here's my opinion. And I'm going to give you my opinion first, then I'm going to give you the nuance. Okay. My opinion is it's the West's fault. That's my opinion. But what's the nuance? The nuance is Putin's not a good guy. There are no good governments. Governments are run by crooked, wicked, demons, for lack of a better word. That said, there's a lot of stuff going on ever since the fall of the Soviet Union that you could point directly back to the West and say, if you had kept your promise, then this would have never happened. They promised Gorbachev that they would not absorb all those satellite countries. What did they do? Since the early 90s, that's what they've been doing, one after another, absorbing these satellite nations. Well, we know for sure they went into Russia and they raped Russia economically, raped Russia. Now, let me tell you what, being in Southeast Asia, the number of Russian women who come and marry locals for money, especially amongst the oligarch class, it's off the charts. Southeast Asian men love Russian women. That's exploitation. Even as far as gay couples here getting Russian women to be the surrogates for their children. I mean, there's one gay couple in Manila that owns a perfume line, and they've had 8 children by Russian women, surrogates. So no, the West really, really, really did abuse Russia. Now, I don't think Russia is the good guy. Again, just to emphasize that. But man, Victoria Nuland just admitted that there are biolabs in Ukraine. The whole time, Russia's been saying there are biolabs. And what does the West say? It says, oh, no, there's no biolabs there. They're just making that up. Oh, really? Oh, really? Look at our own history. What did we just do for 2 years to our own people? Does that sound like people you should be believing? No. So that's why I'm all about small communities and interpersonal networks, and I don't trust the government.
Yeah, one thing that is so interesting is how quickly people again pick teams, and it's like Putin's not the good guy, but so isn't the U.S. And
That's right.
he was absolutely provoked. He, it's not to say what he's doing is right, because I think unfortunately the Ukrainian people, which again, if people know any Ukrainian people, and I know quite a few, a lot of them consider themselves Russian because their families were from Russia, and then moved to Ukraine later, or
Right.
primarily were speaking Russian growing up. I mean, there are different sections, or different types of Ukrainian people. There's some that hate Russians because they were forced to have to speak Russian. I have Estonian buddies that are the same way. Like when they went to school in Estonia, the Estonian kids and the Russians used to fight because they felt like the Russians were pushing their culture onto them. And then there's some people who are Estonian or Georgian or Ukrainian, and they consider themselves Russian because, or at least a connection to that culture as much as they're connected to the culture of the country they live in or are born in because of that Soviet Union thing. So to pretend that he wasn't provoked, I mean, one thing that startles me is just how quickly people just forgot about Afghanistan, Iraq,
Okay.
Libya, Syria.
Syria.
I mean, just I'm like, to me, it's just like what I was telling somebody today. I'm like, what's the difference between what we did to Iraq and what he's doing to Ukraine? Because I'm like, there's some distinct differences. One, uh, Iraq has very little to no cultural similarities to the U.S., and it doesn't border us, and we have no real justification to being there. And it's also whoever runs Iraq, if it's a enemy of the U.S., they don't border us, so they're not a direct threat to us, anyways.
The closest comparison we have is Cuba. That's the closest.
And you look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? I keep telling
That's right.
what happened when the Russians put the missiles in Cuba. We were rip shit. We're like,
we still have a military base on Cuban soil.
Yeah, Gitmo. We also
Yeah, exactly. Right. We it's not just a terrorist detention camp. It's an actual military base, a Marine base.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. I mean, and it's like when the Russians did it, and I said this on Monday we had a Union of Unwanted, and I was telling them how, like, I think the big difference between what we did to those countries and then Russia is that the U.S. puts way more time and effort into PR, because what they did is, right, like the Russians have, like, somebody like yourself or me, we might know that back history of, like, the verbal agreement between the Russians and the U.S., Bush Senior, and how they're not going to expand NATO east and all this stuff. Like, we'll know some of those nuances, we'll know some of those details, we'll understand that, like, hey, there's a lot of Russian people in Ukraine. A huge part of Ukraine speak Russian. It borders Russia, so it's in their interest to have somebody who's friendly to their country there. We'll know about the Victoria Nuland tape that that was released.
Yeah.
About who they wanted in power. Like, we'll know those things. But Russia hasn't spent any time, or doesn't have the resources, or maybe just doesn't have the influence on the international media to get those stories out, to help.
The closest they came was RT.
Yeah,
right. And they banned it. I was going to comment on a couple things. One, I always tell my local friends whenever they start kind of preaching to me about how great the U.S. is compared to here, I'm like, dude, this country's just fine. The U.S. just has better PR. I've said that for years. They just have better PR.
They could have done what Russia did, and that's like with Iraq. They could have said, like, hey, Saddam crossed the line, let's invade. But instead they're like, well, let's link Iraq and Afghanistan to September 11th, even though there's no real evidence there that they're linked. Let's talk about weapons of mass destruction, right? Let's talk about anthrax. Let's get everybody so emotional and so scared that they're not going to be pushing back against us invading. They're going to be wanting us to invade, because it'll make them feel safer. So, like,
that's right.
And they did it internationally, right? They talked to they were globally, they were telling people, like, hey, Saddam has weapons of mass destruction, all this stuff, talking about, there's a video that was where they talked about how clever it was on how they linked Iraq and September 11th. And there was a video where they would show every time Bush would talk about, or Cheney would talk about Iraq or September 11th, they would always talk about the other one. So anytime September 11th got brought up, they would quickly, even if they just changed subjects, they would bring up, they would quickly change the subject and bring up Iraq. So
you realize that these were old school propagandists. They were very, very, very good at what they did. And these guys are dying off. And I'm not convinced that the people who run propaganda for the West right now are all that good. I think they're actually quite bad at it. And I don't know if that's because of independent media, or a change in, the leadership is not as good. I don't know what it is, but clearly they're not very good at it. It's not very believable. And, we might think that there are a lot of people who believe it, but I'm honestly not convinced that a lot of people believe this. What, you got a UFC fighter contradicting the whole narrative? You know about that one?
Who's that?
Some guy from Arkansas.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Oh, I didn't. You know what's funny? I saw that tape circulating, and I'm like, I gotta take a moment to watch that, and I didn't.
oh,
Talk.
it was fantastic. This guy is just a good old boy from Arkansas, and he's like, well, if
And
they show up on Arkansas soil, then I'll plant my feet and I'll fight. But why would I fight for them? I don't even know who they are. I don't even know what's going on there. But he did say, but I do know that Biden and his son have financial interests there.
he sounds like Ali during Vietnam, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, true,
I,
yeah, yeah.
it's yeah, the propaganda. Well, I don't know if you saw there was I think I talked about this with Scott Horton when he was on my show recently. His debate with Bill
Mm-hmm.
Crystal for the from PNAC, the Project for New American Century.
Right, right.
And it's like, like I was telling him when we talked about it, I mean, everybody should listen to it. It's very fascinating. He just like, he's completely content with like, yeah, it didn't work out. Like, that's the way they look at shit. Like, they just completely ignore billions of taxpayers' money going into the pockets of corporations like Halliburton and KBR and all these. They completely ignore the tragedies of civilians being accidentally murdered and all, or killed or whatever. The
This is
PTSD, all this stuff, and it's just like, yeah, I guess maybe we miscalculated, Iraq. It's like, wait, you can't just poo that. You can't just pretend like that, like we just move on. Like it was just a act. Like there's people who are still living with PTSD. There's people who are still living without limbs. There's people
Yep.
who, I mean, this,
They don't care.
yeah, they don't.
Yeah,
It
they don't care.
blows.
War pigs. Uh, you know, Robert Barnes. Are you familiar with Robert Barnes?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, his take on all of this is they're incompetent. That's what he said. These are the same types of people who caused World War One. He said World War One was caused by incompetence. I know in our world we look at it a bit more nefariously, but in his opinion, it was purely incompetence that caused World War One. He said Ukraine is caused by incompetence, and you know, I had this discussion last night with my editor. Like, at what point does it not matter anymore that it's incompetence?
You're
Right?
Well, Rogan does the same thing, and I know you listen to some of his shows too. He was doing the same thing for a long time. Like every time somebody would bring up, like, "Hey, they're skewing the science," or
Right.
these medicines that could help people are being suppressed. He'd always, or big tech is censoring people. He's like, "Yeah, but YouTube has a lot of videos they have to monitor, or because Twitter, blah blah blah, or maybe some doctors don't know, or whatever." And it's like it was always like making a excuse, and then I think
this
he
is
came around.
this is this is somewhere that I disagree with Pete with a lot of these guys, and I'm not going to name names today because I'm get myself in trouble. Some of them might be my clients in the future. The I think that we begin with the wrong assumption. We assume that we have to trust the system for it to work. I think that we've got it backwards. In order for the system to work, we cannot trust it. Because the minute you begin trusting it, some motherfucker is going to take advantage of your trust. That's the way this plays out every single time. So we have to begin with distrust, not trust. So whenever he says, well, don't give them the benefit of the doubt, they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. And I know a little bit about monitoring stuff. Do you know that part of my history was intelligence systems for corporations? And at one point, I did a lot of work with large corporations monitoring, like, are people posting pirated content? And I actually had a meeting with the head of Microsoft intellectual property many years ago.
Bill Gates. Bill Gates.
No, not Gates. Gates was gone. Gates was gone in the 90s, but this is another guy that was in charge of intellectual property for Microsoft. And what I presented to him was, hey, guys, you know, you can't do this with automated solutions. You have to use something that's semi-automatic, right? You have to have human intervention to understand what's going on. And he laughed me out of the room. He said, that's going to take thousands of people to do that. It's not practical. Okay. Fast forward that about 6 or 8 years later, YouTube hires 12,000 people to be monitors of YouTube. They never really cared about content until recently. And they just don't know how to manage it. But you know what? Even then, they still get the blame. These guys don't deserve our understanding. We cannot be nice to them because they have way too much power. Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But that does sound like the story of Michael Jordan telling his high school coach, you shouldn't have benched me. It's kind of like you're like, look, you were wrong, you son of a bitch. You laughed at me then, and now look at me. You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. It has to be semi-automatic. It can't be fully automatic. There's too much. I mean, isn't that also the argument towards like artificial intelligence, right? Like that.
Yeah, it's my counter argument to artificial intelligence. You cannot. Under the current technology we are aware of, a general intelligence is impossible. And what I found from building AIs to monitor content, you have to have human involvement for it to work. So if they're selling to you right now that they're going to make AIs to govern the world, but that's not what they're going to do. What they're going to do is they're going to say it was the AI's decision, but it was actually their decision. How are you going to double check that unless you distrust them?
And I always like government's guilty until proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty.
There you go.
And you can't. I mean, the whole system's broken and it's flawed and it's I mean, some people make the argument that the founding fathers, the way they designed the system, that the kind of the way they were seeing things play out, it would have worked. There would have been checks and balances. And then there's people who just will always find loopholes and ways to kind of exploit things.
I think one of the mistakes that they made was that they should have went even further than what they did. We should have had, I believe we have 3,000 counties in the U.S. If I'm not mistaken. It should have been that each county was a state. And I know, like I was having this discussion with family a year or so ago, and they said, but then everything would be inefficient. I said, that's what we want. You want inefficiency because the minute you get efficiency, that's when you get oppression. As I've heard old time expats say in Southeast Asia, if the governments of Southeast Asia were efficient, it would be hell. But since they're not efficient, it can be pleasant to live here.
That's actually quite fascinating. That's such an interesting perspective. Like, it makes sense. It's weird because it doesn't seem like it should make sense, but it does make sense.
Yeah. And we think that efficiency is the way to paradise. Let me tell you what, efficiency is not the way to paradise. Efficiency is the way to hell. It's the road paved to hell.
But wouldn't some like libertarians say that the government's not efficient? That's why you need to trust in the just capitalism and the free market and all that stuff. And some of the problem with government is that it's not efficient. But
no, I think it's too efficient. Huh. That's my contention. It's way too efficient.
Well, they're definitely okay. So would you say that they're efficient? They're too efficient in things they shouldn't be too efficient in, and then they're not efficient in things that they should be efficient in. Does
Well,
that
maybe I would compromise and say that that's possible. But if they get efficient in anything, somehow it becomes onerous immediately, right? And it doesn't favor the populace. It always favors a select few.
that's very true. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's wild because there's never been a fully like a culture that's been fully one ism, like there's
Mm-hmm.
never been a fully socialistic economy or capitalistic economy. It's always a hybrid mixture of some things. And even if you did have one that was fully, specifically one ism, there's always going to be people who are going to, do things in their own interest that wouldn't give that philosophy a true opportunity to see if it works, and if it
Mm-hmm.
would be what's best for the population. So it's, to me, it's almost like when people talk about like, oh, this isn't that. I'm like, it's almost impossible. No, because the one common denominator with all of the countries and economies and isms and philosophies is that they're going to have to be run by people, and people are
Mm-hmm.
flawed and corrupt. So there's always going to be some corrupt, flawed person
You know,
going to.
perfect example, a perfect example of what we're talking about, masks. What was whenever they mandated masks in states like California, and I'll tell you, it happened here in Southeast Asia too. They mandated masks. What was the first thing that happened? You caught the people at the top not wearing masks and not following any of the guidelines that they gave. It's a microcosm of the big problem. How do you get these guys to follow the same rules? And they're undermining the very reason. You would think if they really believed this, if it was really for your good, that they would be the most devoted in following it. But because they don't follow it, it undermines all of the people who are paying attention. They're paying attention. Wait a minute. If you're not following it, this can't be serious.
Well, and it exposed how they are just actors, right? Like somebody told me today how the president of Ukraine apparently was a actor in
Yep.
a sitcom where he
Yep.
played a president, and I'm like,
Yep.
that's not too hard. Like that's not, to me, like
And
that's,
his whole government is full of his producers and his co-actors.
yeah. But the thing,
Really?
I that's not too hard to believe, because I'm like, literally, to be a politician, a good politician, and I don't mean good as in being.
A useful politician.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, good as in, like, you're good at that game of being a politician, not good as in like you have good morals and a good moral compass.
Right.
To be a good politician, you have to be able to act like you were saying. You have to be able to say something you don't even believe in, like wear masks, and you don't even care for him. Fauci's basically the same thing. He's much more of a politician than he is a scientist or doctor, and
Right.
he was really good at it. So it's, yeah, it's wild, man. It's wild that people will see these stories and they'll be exposed for, like, okay, you're scaring the shit out of the public, and some people are really falling for it and believing you, and paranoid and full of anxiety, and maybe even overdosing or child abusing or domestics or whatever, because of all this pressure and anxiety and uncertainty that you're throwing onto them. And yet you don't believe any of it. You're just going on with your life, throwing parties like freaking Boris Johnson, his
Right.
parties in the UK, or frickin' Ferguson, who got caught going out to see his mistress during the height of the lockdown, even though he's
Whitmer, same thing. Private jet.
news.
Newsom,
French,
same thing.
what is the French Laundry, or it's supposed to be like I mean, they say it's like one of the most expensive restaurants in the world, and this guy's just throwing parties there. Like it's like, first of all, how can you afford to eat there when you supposedly have a public job that pays, you're not a millionaire, like you're not according to the salary you're getting. And that's the thing that, it's Jesse Ventura, who I've been very disappointed with him during the whole COVID thing, but he has said some very brilliant things in the past. This whole idea of like, why would you spend millions of dollars for a job that pays thousands of dollars? It's like, he's absolutely, the money that they spend campaigning and jets going from one state to another and commercials and all this stuff, and yet for a job that pays how much? Like, why would you do that if it wasn't for the fact that you're going to do
Well,
favors and
I
take?
forget which comedian it was, but I think that we should put like advertiser logos on all the politicians. You know,
Yeah.
like
Was it Chris Rock? It might have been Chris
it
Rock.
may have been brought to you by Pfizer. You know, Pfizer logo on his jacket. Yeah.
That's a perfect. That's a perfect. Well, who was it just recently? Was it Hannity or somebody? I think I heard on the No Agenda podcast where they were talking about he did an interview or was on TV or whatever, and he had a CIA little pin on his jacket. And
Oh yeah. It was it was Hannity. He wears a CIA pin.
it's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, do I believe this guy who just has a CIA pen just laying around?
Well, it seems kind of you know what the logic there is. Well, I'm with the CIA. People will trust me because I'm with the CIA. But all of us are like, you're with the CIA. Why would we trust you?
Yeah.
I mean, right? Let's reel this back to Russia for a minute. You went to a public high school?
Yes. Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yes.
You had bullies in the high school?
Yes, and as a metalhead, yeah, I dealt with some bullies. You know, when
Yeah.
you're Metallica player Iron Maiden shirts every day. Yeah.
Okay, we're on the same page with that. I was a scrawny little guy, and I was a metalhead, and you know, I got picked on from kindergarten to high school. Got picked on. Two of these goons during lunch hour, right in the gymnasium. Two of these goons who picked on me picked a fight with one another. And one guy, he was like, they'd held him back 2 grades, and he was like 6'4", and he was a monster of a guy. And the other guy was probably about maybe 5'10", something like that. They're both goons. I nearly got beaten up by both of them over the years. Well, the big guy grabs the little guy by the neck and just pummels him in the face and then drops him on the ground. Do you think I felt any sympathy for either one of them?
Probably not.
That's how I feel about Russia and Ukraine and the West.
They're just
a bunch of bullies fighting with one another.
They are, and unfortunately, Ukraine becomes a pawn in the game. You know, it's like and so many conflicts. Look at like the Korean War, right? Like it was a proxy war for Russia, you know, and the US. They were funding 2 different sides. I mean, that happens over and over again. So like I remember once going on this rabbit hole where I was just like looking at every big war I could think of and just seeing if the US and like some other power was funding one side or the other. And in so many cases, it was the Soviets, you know, and the US were funding money to separate sides. And I'm like, how much worse was this civil war or this, you know, this battle because of the extra money and resources they're getting from outside influences?
And it's only that select few people who actually got the money. The rest of the populace suffered because of the conflict. They didn't. Well, the Koreans at least got K-pop, right?
Yeah, I guess. You know,
oh wait, no, that's punishment. Oh, okay.
It's amazing how big that is too, but it's
insane.
It's insane. Well, that's the thing, the fascinating thing about cultures, right? It's like it can it's like a whole nother parallel universe where that's appealing to them, and I'm just like, I don't get it at all. But there's a lot of shit other cultures, and you just realize,
you know, the Koreans themselves make fun of it too.
They do.
Look at a Korean zombie movie.
I
think my kids are watching. I think it's a Netflix series now. We all end up dead, I think is the name of it, or We're All Dead. And part of it, they make fun of K-pop in the story. So it's not like every Korean likes K-pop, but
well, you know, here's another example, because you talked about UFC, and then we talked about how the whole system is rigged or broke or doesn't work. It just reminds me of a pretty crazy story that just happened recently. So there's this guy, Cain Velasquez, and he's this UFC. He used to be a heavyweight champ, and real. I mean, just everybody who's a Mexican MMA fighter. Everybody always talks about how great of a guy he is, and I've never heard one bad thing about him. And just recently,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
got a notification on my phone. It said Cain Velasquez arrested for attempted murder, and I'm like, that is.
Whoa.
I'm like, that doesn't seem like him at all. I'm like, every interview I've ever seen, but I'm like, who knows? Sometimes these guys personally are lunatics or they snap or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Roid rage.
yeah, or and whatever maybe I don't. He definitely wasn't on roids. He had the typical like Mexican body, but he also had the
Okay.
typical Mexican endurance where he never got tired. He didn't look like he worked out, but he never got tired. I'm like, he is so Mexican. But but so I'm like, okay, whatever. I didn't think too much of the story, and then I started getting some details, and crazy story. And we're both parents, so it always hits home a little bit differently when you become a parent. But apparently, and because this happened to a minor, there very little details are released. But what I'm hearing from other MMA fighters and other people connected or around people who are connected, that what happened was his daughter was molested over 10 times by this dude. And he was linked to the daycare. She's only, I think, 4 or 5 years old. So and apparently this guy has been arrested many, 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 many times. Okay. So, I mean, he shouldn't even be out in public near a daycare, near kids or whatever. But so Cain finds out, and the guy ends up getting arrested. He gets out on bail. Cain Velasquez loses his mind, takes a gun, tries to find this guy to do what probably we could all imagine. And Cain Velasquez gets arrested. They just denied his bail.
So this guy is connected to somebody.
Or the system is completely fucking retarded, because how the hell can you explain? So I guess they said that, and they're saying that because he can be a threat to society or whatever. He's a danger to society, or so they denied him bail. It's like, no, he's a danger to one monster, and he's not a danger to everybody else. The monster is it's
a danger.
Yeah,
for sure.
But this just goes to show how it's not none of it makes logical sense. And it also goes into these deeper, darker conversations about okay, this guy, he might have been molested by his, he could be a person dealing with trauma. He could be, who knows, a sick person who needs help. But he absolutely should be responsible for his actions. And how do you handle these situations? Because I've heard the argument that people who have this desire, temptation, because of the labels and being looked at as a monster, instead of going to get help, they keep it all inside. And some of the stigma, and rightfully so, that comes with being considered or being a pedophile and having those desires. Because I think being a pedophile, and it's been a long time since I've looked into this, because I had a filmmaker years and years ago who on the show that did a documentary, a very controversial documentary called "Are All Men Pedophiles?" And his interest in this topic was, initially, he was a documentary filmmaker, but he was looking at this attractive younger woman, right? And he's like, and he was young at the time, so it wasn't creepy, he was a grandfather or whatever looking at but he knew she was younger than him. And he looks at her and he's like, I find her attractive, but if I find out she's 13, I'm a pedophile. But if I find out she's 18, I'm not. But the desire's there, right? So it's it makes sense when you really think about it, right? It's I know it's a taboo topic, but as people who listen to the show know, I don't stray away from taboo.
Well, you do have to make a distinction here. There is pedophilia, and then there's statutory rape, and they're different. I think that the actual age is 12. That 12 and below is considered pedophilia.
I, I
13 and above is considered statutory rape. So you would be, I think you'd be a sex offender either way, but one has less ickiness to it than the other does.
yeah, yeah. Well, and every country is different. There's some
Mhm.
countries you can get married at 13 or whatever.
My great aunts were all married at 12.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's on my mom.
Well,
Yeah,
what
my mom's
Virgin,
side.
how
Yeah,
old
my
was the
mom's side.
Virgin Mary? The Virgin Mary was like very young.
I don't know how she probably was. She was betrothed.
This
At least that's the way the story goes.
because I remember bringing this the Virgin apparently, and his documentary is actually very fascinating because he goes into like historically, people were having kids and getting married at a much younger age, and a lot of it was for um health issues. If you right when you hit puberty, a woman, her body basically isn't um any more ready to have children right after puberty, or than
See, this is where people disagree. I've heard people say that women shouldn't have children until they're about 18. But then I've heard other people say that that's not true, that the actual best ages are early because then her body's flexible and it can adapt to having children better than if she waited.
Yeah, so what he said was kind of similar in regards to, well, when he would talk to historians and anthropologists and people who know the history of civilizations, and they would talk about how like you're obviously the older you are, the more likely you are of dying of disease or whatever. So having children right, as soon as you could made the most sense. That's when you were the healthiest or possibly could be alive longer to nurture the kid. So it kind of does make sense. And this goes back to like K-pop. A lot of it's cultural, right? So it's like, pedophilia is being I think the pedophilia is, I don't know if it's the desire or the act. I get it confused, but it's before puberty. And
Yeah.
so it has to be before puberty. So basically you're you know, but and then I've heard like people talk about in his documentary, he had actual people who were pedophiles, or they didn't actually act on the temptation, but would admit that they had the temptation and they were dealing with the struggle. And
Right.
um you look at people like that and it's like my hat goes off for them, because anybody who's willing to say I have this problem and I want to get help, like to me, like I wouldn't call them a monster just for having the desire. I would call, because they could be sick, they could be dealing with their own trauma. Unfortunately, hurt people, like that saying. And you see that quite often, where somebody who does very horrendous, awful things were victims of very awful things. So it's like that person never got a fair shot. But of course they have to be responsible for their actions too. So it's like this weird thing of like dislike of this person, but being sympathetic sometimes at the same time, which can make it for a very uncomfortable conversation.
Right.
And that's the thing that like, and I've talked about this a few times on the I remember when I had Nick Bryan. I think Nick Bryan was one of the people that I had this exact conversation. And because he's done the Franklin scandal, he's the one who wrote the book, The Franklin Scandal, and he's been so deep down this rabbit hole. I believe it was him. It was either him or somebody else that went down this rabbit hole in regards to pedophilia and all this stuff and child trafficking. And just me entertaining the idea of like being sympathetic for somebody, you could tell their reaction was like, no, they're monsters, and they're like, and I'm just like, wait, pump the brake.
Well,
Because how do you help them if you we generalize that they're all monsters and they should all, because the one thing you keep hearing is like, lock them all up, they're they're it's like, well, if you don't act on it and you're willing to get help, shouldn't we be celebrating that? Because that means that they're not
well,
and then
I mean,
creating a victim.
we need to create an atmosphere where people can Well, okay, monasteries, for instance. I know that amongst the Eastern Orthodox, there's this one particularly very influential monk, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but he admitted, because for the Eastern Orthodox, homosexuality is a sin, right? He admitted that he was homosexual, and he went into the monastic life because he said, if I stay out in the normal world, there's no way I can control this. So I'll become a monastic, and I'll be secluded, and I won't have to deal with it. Is that any different than a pedophile that he admits, no, I'm going to cause harm if I stay outside? So I need to voluntarily confine myself. Am I making sense?
No, it does. I mean, how different is that than a
It's no
alcoholic,
different.
a recovering alcoholic who says, "Sorry, I can't drink. If I drink, bad things
Right.
happen." And it's
Right.
we look at an alcoholic who ends up ruining his life and ends up making all those mistakes, and maybe even becomes like, I feel like it's because it's the worst of worst crimes, pedophilia, that we can't look at it the same way we look at, like, I feel like maybe I'm assuming, but I feel like if somebody was an alcoholic and they did some bad things, like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe beat their wives or their kids or whatever, and then they're off alcohol and they got their lives together,
Mm-hmm.
we could still be like, okay, he might be a good person who made mistakes. And you could find some, like, you could be like, okay, he did some fucking horrendous things, but I don't see him as a horrendous person forever, but yet pedophilia, you can't look at it the same way because it's such a horrendous act that you just can't even like, you can't look at it as the same.
I tell you, I don't know, man. I think that maybe we live a very cloistered life. My uncle on my dad's, one of my uncles on my dad's side, I had this conversation with him about drinking. He said, uh, you know, I had to stop drinking. He said, because whenever I drink, I kill people. And like, he was really old guy. It's like in his 80s whenever I had this conversation. It's like, no, if I'm drunk, and I'll start beating someone and I won't stop until they're dead.
Wow.
So he stopped drinking. Hold on.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm not that.
Yeah.
My daughter. My daughter asking me. She's supposed to give me a haircut.
Well, and this, the reason why I think this conversation is important is because I have this feeling that people, there, because the thing is, you constantly hear these stories, right? I have this feeling like, I always feel like there's pedophiles everywhere. Like, you always hear about, like, sex, a sex offender that lives nearby or whatever. Oh, did you hear that there's a sex offender? And I'm like, holy fuck, we're surrounded by pedophiles everywhere, or sex offenders everywhere. And you're like, as a parent with young kids, you're always like freaking out about that. And I'm just like, okay, how the fuck do we prevent these things from happening? And one thing we never really talk about, because a lot of times you don't know who they are until they created a victim, until they've done something. So it's like, how do you prevent the worst crime from being done? And I almost feel like you almost have to be sympathetic for the worst criminals, in a way of like, okay, there's people out there who need help. How do we get them to speak out? How do we get them to do something? And how do we get them to get help before something bad happens? And
at the same time, we don't. One of the strategies that's presented is normalization, and I don't think that that's the right strategy. Normalizing it's not acceptable, but having compassion and mercy are acceptable. But recognizing the threat that someone might pose to other people is necessary. So you can't like normalize it and say, no, that's fine. You can do that if you like. No, that's not going to work.
Well, try to normalize. Remember NAMLA, the North American Boy Love?
Yeah.
Whatever the freak it was called. I'm like,
I remember. Yep. I remember them. Mm-hmm.
Like, who? How does this organization exist? How was there like there's
It
like
exists because our politicians all are closet members of it.
that's probably true. I mean, what about all CNN like producers and all these people who are like there's no why is this not headline news? Like the fact that like high ranked people at CNN are
Mm-hmm.
literally
Mm-hmm.
all involved with like some type of underage something, and it's like it's crazy.
It is crazy, but I think it goes back to it's not that far fetched to think that those people are involved in those activities, and that's why they don't talk about it.
You're right. I probably a lot of the times when you hear about, Jimmy Seville and all these people or Weinstein or all these people that are in with the elites and at the same parties and doing business with them. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
how do they not know? It's like, oh, they don't know because, or they don't, it's not that they don't know. They just don't care because they're all involved in it. And when somebody gets caught, it's like, well, we'll sacrifice to them and their reputation, but we'll just keep on going. So, I mean, that's like that documentary, The Open Secret, about Hollywood pedophilia parties, and that was kind of the joke was like, it's not a secret, it's a open secret. Everybody knows about it. Everybody's aware of it. Just nobody. That's why when people get caught, there's always the celebrities who come out and like, oh, I kind of knew, or yeah, I heard about this.
I kind of knew. All right.
Like, come on, dude. Like,
No, you didn't kind of know. They knew.
and the thing is, if you know and or if you heard rumors and you didn't say something, then typically if
Well,
I know a crime is being committed and I don't do anything, I'm guilty of it. I'm just as guilty.
don't you think that this goes back to what we said near the beginning of our talk? You cannot give people the benefit of the doubt. They have the onus of making them unimpeachable. It's not our responsibility to believe them. It's their responsibility to live in such a way as to be unimpeachable. Why would I have that responsibility? I have to live my life in a way that's unimpeachable. They have to too. But what we're doing is we're giving actors and politicians a free pass. We're giving researchers and scientists a free pass. You can't give them free passes. They're human beings. They do bad things. They have to be responsible for making themselves look lily white, not us. We can show compassion and mercy if they mess up, but trust them? No. Am I making sense?
No, you're absolutely making sense. I mean, we're that woman who gets beat up by their boyfriend, and then the boyfriend always says, "Oh, I'm over it. I'm working on it. No, I love you. I'm so sorry to do it again." And we keep going back to the boyfriend. Like that's us. We just keep going. Look, I know the government lied to us about everything and anything,
but not this time.
Not this time. This time they're telling us the truth. It's like it's crazy. Now I know we ran out of time, but
no, man. I was looking down there. I was like, man, Ricky said he didn't have time.
I am certain I have probably pissed off some people running a little late, but it's all right. But do you have a elevator pitch of the University of Reason? Because
oh yeah. Let me tell you, autonomy, University of Reason, absolutely one of the best experiences I've had in the last 2 years. Highlight of my time. Not only do you get a rich, structured presentation of why the establishment cannot be trusted, but you also get involved with a whole network of people who think similarly. And you might even, if you're in business, if you're looking for freelance work, you might even get some of that too. I have my network grew exponentially after I got involved with autonomy, and I would recommend it to everyone else out there.
Awesome.
There's my elevator pitch.
Well, yeah, because Rich, and as everybody who listens to the show knows, I hate, commercials and advertising and all that stuff, and any type of commercials or marketing. But when Rich reached out, it made sense because I'm like, okay, so one big theme in this show is like, hey, start a ripple. Like we can all start a ripple
Mm-hmm.
effect. You never know where that ripple is going to lead. And then when he reached out, I'm like, you know what? It kind of makes sense because his University of Reason seems to be helping a lot of people get out of those jobs that they dislike and pursue something more fulfilling and start their own ripple. So it's like I'm I would be helping advertise something that one I like the person who started it. I
Yep.
people connected to it. I mean, obviously, I met you through Rich, and
Right.
I've really liked Rich, and I know him personally, so I really enjoy the guy and think he's a sincere person. And and it helps with this idea of getting people to stop doing their unfulfilling whatever nonsense that they're doing and maybe
Mm-hmm.
pursue something that they love, or maybe they're at a crossroads in life and they need some help with finding out which direction to go, and it seems like it can help with that. And so I'm like, well, why not? Well, why not? And but it's University of Reason's like so many things that I'm like, how do I explain what? Like, it's not just one thing, so it's hard. It's kind of a hard thing to explain.
Yeah. It's first a course. It's second a network, and the network is phenomenal. I just can't begin to tell you how great the network is. There are some really stellar people in there. And I'm not engaged with getting people to come into autonomy all that much, but I do happen, people refer people to me for like contractors and all that that are prospects to go into autonomy. And you would not believe the backgrounds of these people. They're all over the chart. They are getting non-Westerners who are coming and becoming part of the course now. So you got people like from the Middle East. I mean, bizarre. Like I was interviewing one guy the other day to perhaps contract for Content Safe, and like I was kind of like, wow, how exactly did you end up here? And he gave me a really interesting story about how he found out about autonomy.
Well, hopefully, he brings you some of that royal money. It's that Royal Kingdom.
Uh, yeah, well, he was not really that.
He wasn't a Saudi. He wasn't from the
He,
Saudi royal family.
he wasn't from the royal family, but he was from Saudi.
Oh,
And yeah,
well,
and
you
I'm
can't be
like,
broke if you're from Saudi, because
no,
how do you buy
no.
all those camels and
So it's really the potential for you to meet some fascinating people is very likely. You're going to meet somebody really interesting.
Awesome. Now, of course, you want to let people know where they can uh get or keep in touch with you, connect with you, and then also any the services, because you've been obviously a huge help with myself and getting this show on many platforms, which I'm glad that we did connect prior to getting kicked off YouTube and being on the blacklist of Google. My website doesn't come up like it used to when you search my show or my name on Google. And I think once you get kicked off YouTube, you get on some type of list, or you get, shadow banned or suppressed in some way. And that's probably just a part of their policy of like, hey, if we don't want you on YouTube, we also don't want people finding you on Google, because obviously it's on
Right.
one company. So but you've been a huge help with just getting this show out where I can. What do you do? How can people connect with you if they're looking for those services?
Uh, I'm involved in IT consulting. I do large projects as well as small. I have a fairly nice team, small number of very experienced people. Uh, so I can entertain almost anything. We even are currently consulting with people on cryptocurrency projects. If you want to contact me there, you can go to my website, anomalistdesign.com. Just send me an email at info, and then it'll get to me. Content Save is my other little endeavor, which I'm helping out content creators like yourself. We're not only redistributing content, but we've gotten into recently helping people boot their podcasts. And my other little business, if you happen to be in need of an auto mechanic and you're in the state of Ohio, because right now we're going to be doing our pilot project in Ohio and then expanding out from there. That's mechanic-mobile.co. Oh, and Content Safe, it's contentsafe.co.
Awesome. Like you didn't have enough on your table. Nothing like taking on a new project.
Yeah, man. No, if you looked at my list of things that I'm involved in, I'm embarrassed to even go down. The list is too big.
I mean, it's awesome. I mean, it's awesome how motivated and how much stuff you get done. I mean, that's why sometimes when like I ask you, hey, can you help me with this? I'm like, he's so busy. I'm like, I hope he doesn't feel like I need this done immediately or I'm in a rush or anything because I know how busy you are, and obviously also being a parent and being your personal life has to have its own designated time too. So you got to try to balance everything.
Well, what I could say is I have a great group of people who work with me. Uh, I don't have to worry about like anything. I just focus on work. That's it. If I have downtime, I have downtime. I get to go hiking 3 times a week. I get to watch a little bit of YouTube with my wife before I go to bed. I don't have to cook meals. I don't have to do laundry. I mean, everybody in the house takes care of me. And my family in the States takes care of all the business stuff in the States for me, and my contractors all take care of the work for me. I mean, I'm coding and doing stuff and writing stuff, but I just don't have a lot of the distractions that a quote unquote normal person would have.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, one thing you learn when you meet people who have successful businesses is that a lot of times we have this assumption that it's like, oh, they must be a genius who does everything. It's like, no, no, no. The genius part of running a successful business is putting together a great team. And if you can do,
That's right.
that's a huge part of it, is just finding people who are really good at the things you need or managing or whatever it may be. So yeah, without a doubt. So yeah, that's awesome to hear. And hopefully everything keeps growing and going, and the best of luck with everything. And
Thank you.
like I said, you've been a huge help with me. I mean, I wouldn't know what I would do because there's still people who find my show because it's on Band.video or it's on Rockfin or it's on whatever. Every once in a while I'll get these emails or messages. It's like, oh, I just found your show on this platform, that platform, and it's like YouTube used to be that platform, and now you don't have YouTube. It's like,
Your band.video stuff, there are times you can get 25,000 views on a video at band.
yeah,
Did you?
they're killing it. Like it's amazing how many, like every once in a while I'll go on there and just see what's been uploaded or what whatever, and I'll be like, well, one video will have like 200 views and the next video will have like 2,000 views. I'm like, wow, there's some drastic differences from like one video to another. So but I don't know, maybe it's timing or the
I think it's the person that is
I think
in
so
the
too.
video. If you look, like I'm looking at your band account right now, the one I'm kind of surprised that Dell didn't get more than 2,300 views. But if you go back, let's see, Corbett usually gets a lot of views. So if it's a Corbett video, you're going to get a lot of views. I think your Ventura video got one of the most
Yeah, I believe
views.
that was one of the ones that. So I think you're right. It's people, it's guests that they're familiar with. Like
Hmm.
I have Rob Wolf on. Rob Wolf is a huge star in the nutrition world, and he was just on Rogan's podcast recently too, and Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, another guy who's well known in like the keto world and paleo world. But on Band.video, that's not those people, who might be intrigued with those topics. They might not know those names. So people in the alternative media world, like you said, like a Jesse Ventura or a Corbett, those are the ones who are like, oh, I know that guy. Let me watch.
Right.
So
Ventura's video got 31K views.
I haven't listened to that in a long time. I hope I didn't suck because there's a lot of people watching it apparently. A lot of those
Yeah.
videos, I cringe just thinking about them. I'm like, I kind of suck now. Never mind back then. Like every once in a while, I go back and like for whatever reason, I'll recommend an old show that I did some years ago. I'm like, oh, I did a great show that you might want to listen to on that topic. And then I'll go back and listen to a few parts of it. I'm like, oh my God, I hope they don't listen to this.
Yeah, I had a show yesterday. I was on the Vanu podcast. Are you familiar with Shane Radliff?
Name sounds familiar.
Great guy, great guy. You should have Shane on Ripple Effect
Yeah.
to talk about Rayo and Vanu, which is a form of anarchism that it resonates very strongly with me. It's an apolitical version of anarchism.
Huh. Yes, send me a link. I'll check it out. That sounds fascinating.
He's got a couple different websites. I'll send it over to you in chat later.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. I know you're a busy guy, and
Thank you, sir.
yeah, and well, I'm sure we'll talk again in the near future, either on the
Oh,
Union
definitely.
or on here. And it's again, thanks again from the bottom of my heart from all the help. I mean, you created a beautiful website that I really appreciate you doing, and it's awesome to have a one-stop shop where if I got kicked off a bunch of platforms, at least I know I have my website and I could send people there. So thanks a lot for all your help and for helping get the word out there and get my content out there. And I hope people listening who are in similar situations, if they're content creators or want to build a website or any of the many services you can help them out with, I hope they check out your content safe and all your websites and all your information. And I'm sure sometime in the near future you'll find some time to record your own podcast, deplatformed, which I'm sure has taken a backseat.
It has, unfortunately, and I interviewed a couple people, and I really want to get that moving again, but I got to get more staff, and the other is I got to get a little bit more money coming in. Once if I get both those, then I'll have some time to produce deplatform.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat where it's just like I love this podcast. I love everything I'm doing, but it's like I have a full-time job that I often neglect to find time to do this that doesn't pay the bills. And it's just like a lot of times I'm so stupid. I'm like, why do I keep neglecting my full-time job and I'm putting myself in these shitty situations? But I so believe, like in my heart I believe like eventually this will be my full-time job, I'm hoping. And I that's why I'm like, every moment and time I invest into this will get me closer. So I just keep telling myself that, and that's why I guess it justifies me neglecting my full-time job. But it's also a little bit because I also enjoy this and I hate my full-time job. So that's to do this. I mean, this never feels like work, even when I'm editing, upload, whatever it may be, trying to book guests, contacting people. Like it's always fun. I love meeting people. I love having conversations with people. I like picking their brains. So it's always fun. So that's kind of the life goal, right? Like in the perfect world, we'd all be doing something for a living that we actually enjoy, so
ideally.
Ideally. Thanks, Matt. Hey, enjoy the rest of your day and we'll keep in touch.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.